Oh, it's braking! I tell you what, that was close. But let's see how we got there. As we get underway with this 5-lap race around Le Mans, I start from P1, Big Bird 17, who I'm communicating with during the race, but unfortunately his mic didn't come through, so I've cut that out. P2, a gentleman in P3 in the NSX, and there's another car that comes into the back later on. As we get underway for the race, and as always in this weekly race, the Mercedes charges at me before turn 1. I go defensive to try and hold position. He's on the outside, I'm on the inside. As you look at the top right screen, we're side by side at turn 1. He goes shallow, I go deep, which gives me the position at turn 1, but on the exit he comes at me, and we're side by side coming down the Dunlop bridge. As I try diving up the inside of Big Bird before we get onto the straight for the first time, the cars behind have pulled back a tiny bit. With no Mercedes CLK in third place, I decide along here to bump draft Big Bird and try and build a gap, so it's a one-on-one battle for the lead. As I nail the exit out of the right-hander there, I'm right behind Big Bird, but even with a perfect exit and the draft, I'm still just too slow. But that's fine. As we get ready to shift into 6th gear, as we start to reach the Porsche curves, you now see how big of a difference and how much I need to lift off through this section. And that's where the Mercedes is let down so massively in this race. But if it can just hold its position, it can't be overtaken, because the last mini straight that leads to the Ford chicanes, it just pulls away. So you get really close to it here. Even if you get a really good line there, you need to get a perfect line and be the perfect distance behind it here, because you can see the NSX behind us caught us up as well. It's just so hard. It's pulled away. It's pulled away. There's no real way to get past the AMG here. As we come through the Ford chicanes to start the second lap, the NSX has now caught us up. That's how much time was lost. And you saw how far back he was, and the Mercedes that was about to overtake him. We just pull away massively in the GT500 category cars. But if you see how far away the car in 4th place of the AMG category, it's just, we've just left him behind because we're just so much quicker in the corners. But we can't do anything until we get ahead of him in this section, because if we only get ahead now, he'll catch us straight up before we even get a chance to do anything. So as we go through the Dunlop bridge, coming down to the first set of S's, heading onto the back straight for the first time, pretty much going to be a rinse repeat scenario as we try and catch up and overtake him again on this lap as we start the straights for the second time this race. As we come down to the Indianapolis chicane, or whatever it's called, I don't know the track name properly, but we've got a half-second penalty to serve, and so does the Honda behind us. During the race, neither one of us knew the car behind had a penalty, but I managed to get up the inside for the first time. He kind of let me wait because he knew I had the penalty. But as I served the penalty, Mercedes easily gets ahead, regardless. It was going to anyway if I had the penalty or not. But the NSX serves it as well, and that kind of is a very neutral penalty. No one really gained or lost anything. I might have been ahead, but he would have overtaken me anyway here. So as we go for the second attempt through the Porsche curves, let's see if I've got the perfect gap to try and make a move to get ahead of him here. As immediately you can watch me closing up the gap almost instantly. As we go through the left-hander, onto the right-hander, I'm now right behind him, but I've got to slow down. There's nowhere for me to go. As I try and do it around the outside, I just squeeze it around the outside as we head towards the chicane. The Mercedes tucks in behind me, and it's my first time this race I've managed to actually get ahead of the Mercedes, with now the NSX sitting right behind us once again. As we go through the chicane, the Mercedes fucking bims it, but manages just to hold on. If the NSX and I work together here, we shall be able to pull away from the AMG just for a little bit. That purely depends on if he gives me the bum draft or if he tries to be selfish and goes for the overtake. So as the NSX catches up to me, he decides to go for the overtake, not wanting to work together, which me and Big Bird are chatting in this point, saying what an absolute moron for this guy to be doing this. He should be working together with us, as he gets a very, very, very terrible exit. And him and I now side by side, not getting any draft on each other. He slips behind finally, goes for my draft, and once again, once he has the chance, he decides to go around me, which is just the absolute most stupid thing he could be doing here. He could have been working together with me, guaranteeing a 1-2 for us, but as you're about to see in about 2 seconds, it's kind of null and void. It's brought the Mercedes back into it now. He's now within our draft. We're still side by side. I led him through, and we're now going into the final straight, but the Mercedes is now right behind me. He's going to get ahead of me in no time. In fact, that time is now. So as we are diving up into the final part of the back straight before we go on to the final of the straights. The Mercedes sits in P2, I sit in P3, and the NSX sits in P1. As they dive up to the corner, as everyone has a pretty neat moment, he goes ghost, the NSX doesn't, which is always a really weird dynamic as the NSX goes wide. And if you look at the top right before it changed camera angles, then you would have seen two Mercedes just on the horizon with us. Now, one of those catches up to us shortly, and it's due to a mix of the wet weather, I believe, that happens in this race, as well as just all constantly battling very heavily for position through the next couple laps. As we go into the Porsche curves, the NSX dives up the inside because I have a bad line going into it. Around the outside, we try and go too wide. Do we bump a little bit? Yeah, he doesn't. Not meant to go 2 cars there, but he pulls away. I think he's got slightly better cornering than I do. I'm not really specifically sure what's better. But he goes for a massive overtake on the AMG. Instead, just goes up the arse of it instead, which traditionally the Japanese and the Singapore drivers have been very dirty from an Australian's perspective, but this massive battle that's just happened has brought 4th place right into it, and this guy starts in last place and is mega quick. As we're noticing the windscreen wipers being a bit more prominent now. Starting the 4th lap, we look at the bottom right, and there's a bit of weather coming in. And if you can see on my dash on the bottom right there, on the left of my tyre choice, it'll tell you how wet the track surface is. With it now being a 5-way battle for P1, 3 Mercedes, 1 Nissan, and 1 NSX, it's now a very tight battle. As after all the things that happened in that last bit, I've managed to get into P1. As I try and get a nice getaway here, I nailed this sector quite well. I've spent that much time perfecting this sector because of the amount of restarts I had in pre-practice. I'm now pulling away. I've got a nice little gap there of about a second, but it's going to be null and void. Obviously, the Mercedes is going to catch up to me with cars behind having penalties to serve. Me looking at the track map right now, looking for how much wet weather's coming in. We're just starting to tick over into the intermediate range, which will mean we're not going to have any grip. As I'm like, okay, it's going to come and then it's going to go, and after that I'm going to be perfectly fine. As I look for my braking point, braking a bit early. The understeer is now being felt. I braked a little earlier, but as you see the car behind me cutting the corner, he didn't get a penalty for that, but someone else does, and it basically allows us to fully pull away as we go on to the second of the 3 big straights. As the weather's now fallen away, it's still slightly above wet, slightly above dry I should say. The intermediates are still the quickest out at this exact moment, and the dries will be very slippery as we head to the second chicane. I brake earlier than usual, but the understeer is just so noticeable, as well as the increased braking distance. I just managed to stop it in time, but as we get on the power, it's wanting to get away from me, but I managed to do a really good job this time around of keeping it together. I'm believing I'm mixing up one of the previous races where I was really struggling with the brakes in the wet. But as we're coming down now, the Mercedes is now just close enough to be a threat to me. As I'm looking behind me constantly in the top mirror, I'm just ahead. Going to this corner, I think this is where I mess up my braking a little bit. Trying to turn, trying to brake, the car just doesn't want to rotate. That bit snap oversteer, and any chance I had of holding position coming to the next part of the race is now gone as I sit on the middle of the track. He gets beside me and I let him go through. It's now up to me to try and hold on to P2, as P3 and P4 are both in the Mercedes, I believe, and they are right behind me. But sitting in the draft just allows me to pull away here. Not pull away, but keep a big enough distance. As we go into the right left-hander, unsure of how safe we can be, as we're both very cautious through him, a bit very squirrely but holding it together. Me trying my best to get through here, but unfortunately I'm just unable to just overtake, as there's no real overtaking opportunity here. As we exit the corner, the Mercedes behind me, the guy behind me right now, he's been starting in last every race, and he is mega quick. There is no denying that. If he started first, he'd be winning race after race after race, but he's not. He's usually up the front with us, as all our battling has allowed him to come in. The wet weather on the outside of the track, I think, slowed him down, or he let me through knowing I wasn't going to get away because I'm now stuck behind him. As we come through the Porsche curves, and once again, you look at the mirrors and you look dead ahead. You just see the difference in grip that the cars have. As we come out the left-hander, my only real opportunity to overtake is get a perfect exit and able to make a move here, but once again it's just unable to happen as we go down to the forward chicanes for the second last time this race, and we try and get the win somehow. As four of us are battling at the moment, the fifth car must have had a penalty or spun out, as he was right with us at the start of the lap. But as we start the final lap, four cars, three different makes. On paper, the Skyline should be winning this hands down, but the Mercedes has just got that much tremendous straight line speed. It's just impossible to do anything about it. As we try and aim for a very perfect line through here, my idea here for this last lap is to just try and separate myself from the car behind, but it's just so impossible with the amount of straight line speed the Merc has. Even if I do pull away, I'm now boxing from the car ahead who's in the Mercedes as well. So we're now going for the back straight for the final time, getting an appropriate exit, good enough to let me pull away, as the Mercedes must have... No, he didn't get overtaken. Look, they got overtaken on the previous screen, but he is now going to be chasing me down. I'm just doing my best not to allow him to push and catch up to me, but it's going to be inevitable based on how fast the Mercedes is. If we look in the mirror on the left-hand side of my car, we can see them creeping up. As we come down to the final part of the race, we're 5 laps in. It's been a four-way battle pretty much the whole way. The NSX has kind of dropped off here. The two Mercedes are pulling away. As I just sit in the draft, nothing I can do here. Even in the draft, the lead car is still going to be quicker than me, and the car behind is right behind him. Just sit in the draft. At this point, I'm like, right, P3 is going to be the best I can hope for. Not because I can't see what's going on behind in VR. So I have no idea the car behind me has a 0.5 second penalty. So I'm perfectly safe from him. The Mercedes in fifth place is just too far back to do anything. He might overtake the NSX. But as we come around here, he's gone deep. They're going too wide to the next corner. I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? I was like, right, we'll take the normal driving line and we'll take a sharper line. They've both gone too wide. They've had a slight bump. It's pushed the guy that's probably the quickest out of the three of us out wide. And it's allowed me to get the draft on bird for the final sector. Allowed me to get into P3. But if you look at my mirror, you can just see not being clipped out by the trackside view. You can see him coming for the move. I go defensive, trying to force him to the left, but he goes right and decides to pull out of it, which is very good of him. That was very smart and respectful by him. As we come through the Porsche curves for the last time, I do not think there's any way I can actually get through here. As we sit on the inside, try to go the inside, not happening. As we chuck right, I've dropped back a little bit so I can get a good line through here. Chuck left, bumper to bumper. He's going to slightly pull away, and we're coming up to the final chicane. Do I go left? Do I sit behind him? Do I hope for a mistake? What do I do? 200 IQ play here, round the outside. Throw it in. And he's got P1. The last possible moment in this race. Park it on the apex. An absolutely mega drive from everyone there. I did agree with Wolf that I probably should have got a penalty for that move, because I did technically go into the pits and cross the solid white line, but the game didn't, and it made for a very spectacular finish where we were all improved.